Advertising is a surprisingly challenging thing to do. On the one hand, you're trying to hype people up so that they want to buy a product or service, but at the same time, if you cross any lines, you're going to end up doing the opposite, and then you have to mix all of those considerations into the budget of the person or company which has hired your agency to do it. Now, naturally, most advertising campaigns are quote-unquote safe, in that they don't stray too far from talking about what's actually being offered, and sometimes one or more mascots are invented to talk about related positive things or say snazzy catchphrases. However, back in the mid-80s, when Domino's Pizza wanted to promote a policy of pizza delivery in 30 minutes or it's free, the company they hired to come up with the ad campaign took a very different approach by instead creating a mascot called the Noid, which served not as the protagonist, but as the antagonist to the pizza chain, trying his hardest to stop pizzas from being delivered on time with a variety of traps and gimmicks, although never actually succeeding. The idea behind the name and advertising was that people would often get annoyed with how long pizza deliveries would take with rival chains, so to quote, avoid the Noid, you should order from Domino's. Yeah, you see what they did there, right? Don't get annoyed, instead avoid the Noid. Despite the Noid being intentionally made to look creepy and weird in a claymation style, his antics were funny to watch, mainly thanks to that whole claymation approach, which allowed for some really crazy results, which in turn led to the Noid becoming a surprisingly popular character in and of himself, which led to other avenues of marketing beyond the pizza chain, which led to the Noid appearing in 2 video games right around the end of the 80s and the start of the 90s, one of which is Yo Noid, a reskin of the NES game Kamen no Ninja Hanamaru, which was made by Capcom, as well as today's ancient DOS game simply titled Avoid the Noid, just like the catchphrase they came up with. Actually, truth be told, this isn't all that bad of a game, but it's definitely a shallow game without a lot of replay value, so I don't really have a ton to say about it. Plus, I can't even imagine ever paying full price for something like this. Though thankfully, no one ever did. If we take a quick look at the box cover, you'll notice a little tagline in the bottom corner which says, affordable fun. Because based on my research looking at old software catalogs, this thing typically only sold for $10. They intentionally made this game as cheap as they could without sacrificing the actual quality of what they were making so that more people would be willing to grab it and then play it and then get both pizza and Domino's on their minds more often. Seriously, none of this is accidental. When an advertising company is doing their job right, these are the kinds of results you end up with. I mean, geez, Avoid the Noid is kind of like the grandfather of Chex Quest in its own weird way. Avoid the Noid was developed by the very short-lived company known as California Merchandising Concepts, who made this game and then shut down not long following, and was published by ShareData in 1989. It's a one-player arcade-style game featuring support for most of the common 80s graphics formats, although Tandy 16-color support is notably absent, while it supports the ad-lib for music and the PC speaker for sound effects. One thing that's actually kind of impressive is that the game is able to produce digitized effects over the PC speaker while continuing to run ad-lib music in the background. Granted, everything else has to pause while the digitized effects are playing, but still, that's kinda crazy that they were able to pull that off. As for its current release date, despite the game's budget pricing, it was never made freeware and didn't stay on store shelves very long. Thus, it's exceptionally hard to find copies of nowadays, since there's so few out there in the first place, with none turning up in my searches, and the price tracking sites out there had barely anything to go on to come to any accurate conclusions about how much it should even be worth. Now, that said, ShareData generally didn't copy protect their disks, and the ShareData copyrights are pretty much in limbo by this point, as they were originally transferred to a holdings company when ShareData went bankrupt in the mid-90s, with said holdings company itself no longer being in business, since nearly 2 decades ago it had merged with another holdings company, which also is no longer in business. I highly doubt anyone on the face of this planet knows who owns the rights to the ShareData games anymore. So in a sense, if there was ever a legitimate way to use the term abandonware, this is it. A game where literally no one cared about the rights, and thus the paper trail of ownership goes stone cold. But almost stone cold, as I managed to track down one and only one person from the holdings company to a modern day company which wholesales vaping products, so take that how you will. Oh, there's one other thing I feel I should point out, since I have the actual 5¼ disc for this game, as I'd like to clear up a misconception about the look of these discs. Now, if you pull up the image on the Moby Games website of what the disc looks like, well, yeah, that doesn't look so good. The reality is that the labels on these discs look perfectly fine in person, as they're using a special silver backing which shines in the light, as I'm showing you all now by tilting my actual disc around. But what's weird about this silver backing is that if you look at it straight on, be it with a camera, scanner, or even the naked eye, there is almost zero reflection, and thus it looks terrible. So yeah, just wanted to clear that up, that these share data disc labels look great in person, just not so great otherwise. Okay, let's finally get into the gameplay of this thing. You play the role of a Domino's delivery driver with the goal of delivering a pizza to the CEO of Doom Industries up on the 30th floor of his corporate headquarters. Now, as per Domino's delivery policy in the 80s, you have 30 in-game minutes to get that pizza delivered, or else it's game over. Though I should point out that the half hour of in-game time is actually just a little over 13 minutes real time. All the while, you have the titular Noids trying to stop you. Not because they hate you, but because they hate the pizzas. Thus why anytime they catch you, they stomp the pizza you were delivering flat, laugh about it, and then you start back at the bottom of the current section of the building you're in. Also, get used to that laughing Noid screen because you're going to be seeing it a lot if you decide to play through this thing. The controls are not only incredibly simple, but surprisingly forgiving for a game this old, so long as you use a joystick or gamepad. The keyboard controls use the BIOS keyboard handler, and thus you can't hold any keys down, which makes moving left and right incredibly difficult. Thus, you definitely want to go with joystick controls this time around. And not to mention, this is one of the extremely few side view games, especially of this vintage, with analog controls. I am not kidding, the amount you hold the joystick to the left or right determines whether you walk or run, which is yet another reason not to go with the keyboard if you can help it. Now, even though the game only uses 2 joystick buttons, there's 3 actions you can perform. The first button is used for jumping and rolling, whereby the button normally makes you jump, but if you hold down while pressing the button, you'll perform a roll instead. Plus, with the right timing, you can instantly go into a roll from a jump to extend your semi-invincibility, since when you're jumping or rolling, the Noids cannot touch you. And they also can't touch you if you're moving between floors and the elevators off to the sides, so those are good places to hang out while waiting for the hallways to clear. The second button is your interaction button, and is used to interact with ringing phones or to open locked doors. And yet another stroke of good game design, unlocking a door takes a moment, yet any movement or action cancels this process. Thus, if you go to unlock a door, but a Noid has turned around and is now gunning for your pizza, you can simply turn around and jump over the Noid then and there. However, if you find yourself in serious trouble, pressing both joystick buttons simultaneously will use one of your Noid avoiders, which you get 5 of to start with. Using a Noid avoider basically erases everything dangerous from the screen all at once. What's pertinent about this, though, is that when a Noid runs into you and knocks you down, it still takes them a moment to start jumping on your pizza to flatten it. Thus, if you quickly use a Noid avoider as soon as you get hit, you're able to get back up after a moment without losing your pizza, with your pizzas effectively being your extra lives. The first traps you're going to have to deal with are the false floors. Now, these are pretty common early in the game, but thankfully are much less prevalent in the higher floors. Now, even though the enemies are generated and move around at random to some extent, the traps are completely not random, so once you know where the false floors are, you can dodge them with far less effort on every attempt you make at playing this thing. Following this, though, you're going to start encountering phones. Unfortunately, this is where things get a bit ridiculous, since your first time playing through, you're not going to know which phones are necessary to pick up, and which will have a Noid on the other end ready to blast you apart. But again, though, this part of the game is not random, so once you know which phones are bad, you can just avoid them. Well, mostly. There's one phone up on the final 3 floors which has a Noid on the other end at first, but once you put in the code to unlock access to the 30th floor, that same phone will now have a key in it. Oh yeah, the code. As you get higher into the building, there's 3 phones you're going to have to pick up, as they'll give you the 3 digits for a code to enter on the 29th floor. These digits are indeed random, and even if you're using a joystick or gamepad, you must enter them using the keyboard. Which is kind of annoying, but whatever, it's a DOS game, you were gonna have a keyboard. Before you get up there though, you're also going to be dealing with rockets, as well as Noids with rocket launchers. Now, I gotta say, kind of ridiculous giving these creatures one of the most lethal handheld weapons known to exist, but the plus side is that the Noids carrying rocket launchers can't turn around and can't smash your pizza. But on the flip side, if you so much as gently graze one of these rockets, it's gonna explode and your pizza's gonna turn into a cinder. Thus, you have to have your timing spot on to dodge these things, and don't even think about trying to dodge 2 in a row. Once you get up to the top floor, you're going to find out that the door into the CEO's office needs 3 keys to unlock, but there don't seem to be any keys left. What you need to do now is head up to the roof, where a pair of Noids are flying by in biplanes trying to water bomb your pizza to make it all soggy. Now, the water splashes have some range to them, so you can't get too fancy with your dodging. But at the same time, the key is flashing around at different spots, and thus it can be surprisingly hard to catch it. Upon grabbing the first key though, additional keys won't show up unless you drop back down to the 30th floor and then go back to the roof, which is kind of annoying, but not really that big a deal. And I think the logic here was to do it this way specifically so that the game could make fun of you for only using 1 key on a 3-key door. Which it'll do anyways if you try to open the door with all 3 keys. Though in that event, all you do is try again and the door will open. After which you deliver the pizza and your remaining time gets counted up as bonus points for a high score to be put into a non-existent high scores table. I guess you're gonna have to track your own high scores with pen and paper or something. Overall, Avoid the Noid does exactly what it set out to do, be a cheap, short, yet decent arcade-styled game meant to promote the Domino's Pizza branding. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and does some surprisingly unique things, but at the same time has some mechanics which would make the game abysmal had it been any longer or more randomized than it is. Definitely worth trying at least once just for the heck of it, but unless you're a speedrunner, once is really enough with this one. As for setting it up in DOSBox, just leave cycle set to auto and you're good to go. I will say the joystick controls did seem a little too sensitive at times, and that might be solved by turning off timed intervals, but it's not that big a deal really, as you're rarely going to care about walking slowly compared to running. Anywho, that's all for today's episode of Ancient DOS Games. Next up, 2 weeks from now, on Saturday, April 13th, will be another review, episode 326, where we're going to be sticking with the claymation theme, at least a little, and taking a look at a game where you basically get to play around with genetic manipulation to stop an evil person from playing around with genetic manipulation. Yeah, not sure what to expect with this one, so make sure to stay tuned to see what they were even able to do with such a premise. Thanks for watching, everyone, and extra special thanks to all the folks shown here supporting me on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show directly and see your name here as well, head on over to patreon.com/KASICK. By the way, here's the manual for this game. Yep, it's literally just one small sheet of glossy paper printed on both sides. That's about as budget as you can get.